Hello and welcome to my new video. Today I will print this negative from my contact print. So let's find it in my storage and load it in an enlarger. Honestly, it's much easier to find the negatives if they have a contact sheet. So I feel I get a taste of the dark side of the fully analog process. Anti-Newton glass for my enlarger is still in a long backlog because at the moment I'm thinking what to do with my darkroom, what furniture I need and so on. And I'm quite busy with my daily life at the moment, so step by step and with the small iterations I improving my darkroom. Because this negative is 6x6, I need to exchange lens from the 50mm to 80mm. I have an 80mm Röhrenstock lens. I actually quite like it more than my 50mm because of usability and the blocking of the maximum f-stop. You can easily open it up fully and close it down to required aperture. And I always quite surprised how much light lenses in general block to the negative. If you remove the lens, it's actually quite bright light, and I always quite surprised how small amount of light you condense on the paper. Next step, I will make a focusing and check my sharpness and magnification on this negative. And because I have a different size of black and white paper, I need to adjust my easel to the size of the paper. So I usually make it like this. I make it two lines, which is border of the left and top side, and from there I rotate the paper and make the adjustment of the movement part of the easel to the size of my paper to have even sides from each side. Probably this is not the best easel what you can imagine in life, but I actually really like them. And honestly, I don't see a reason why the easels, especially brand new, cost like a rocket ship. I honestly cannot imagine what can cost more than 1,500 euros for the easel with a central adjustment, and I think it's just prices getting a little bit ridiculous for some of the parts in the darkroom. If you think about it, even this small and not really precise grain focuser costs around 30 euros. But let's go back to the negative. It was actually a lot of discussion in the comments in the previous videos about the sharpness and the edge on black and white paper and so on and so forth. I honestly at the moment don't see any reasons with the sharpness, and this is a really good news. I go more or less with the same procedure what I do with the color photography and color printing. I make a test print and I make a steps usually with the 5 seconds per one opening. And because I have a smaller 10x15 paper, I make a test on exactly the same paper but a smaller size. In my darkroom, as always, it's a little bit chilly and my water is around 17 to 18 degrees, so I need to warm it up a little bit. And because I have a temperature control, I can easily put 20 degrees and just control 20 degrees inside the bath, and all of my black and white chemistry will be precisely 20 degrees. I will remake the stop bath, and honestly I need to order more chemistry for my darkroom, and honestly I need more good storage bottles. And I think people most of the time have a misconception about the color printing and array for chemistry. So far I seen the black and white exactly the same thing and exactly the same set of chemistry. You just don't really need to heat up and wait to the 35 degrees on the printing, but I think if you just start as a first step heating up the bath, meanwhile you're loading the negative, you will get the bath to the proper temperature. One additional note and comparison of the black and white paper and the color paper. Color paper was developed for using in industrial machines, and you're using free LEDs at the moment, and before it was a free single source lasers. And the problem with the lasers and with the LEDs in the back in the time, it's actually power. So the paper should be quite sensitive, and in our home use probably it's too sensitive for general use and you need to be more careful with the light leaks and more careful with the safe light. And development for black and white, it's also quite simple. I probably don't answer it previous times, but it's 50 seconds of the developer and 1 minute of fixer, and in between you can use a stop and you can also wash your paper afterwards. So my first attempt was actually overexposed, so I closed down the lens, and because I have a first exposure relatively close, I will just make one click more and make a steps with the 2 seconds intervals. And this mistakes just occurs because I have a zero experience in the black and white and no notes in my lab book about magnifications and exposure, what I need to use for different types of paper. So let's repeat the procedure. I will make 50 seconds development, 30 seconds stop, and 1 minute fix. And afterwards I will make 1 minute washing of the paper. So honestly, I will probably stick for this winter with the black and white film on my medium format camera. I will try to make more shots with the different weather and different lighting. Because at the moment my biggest problem is actually light, because I'm in Copenhagen in Denmark. And here we have a lot of Christmas lights, but completely non-environment light, and the blue sky is completely gone, probably up to spring. And in winter I have a lot of things to do, and first thing, I have backlog of the prints which I want to make from half of the year, I think. And this is also difference between the analog photography and digital one. In winter you actually have a lot of things to do in your darkroom, and you don't really need to shoot a lot, and film photography relatively slow process, and in the same time if you compare your photos, you have for example 36 shots, and if you print them it's quite a lot of work. So you try to select the better shots and work only with the good ones, but at the same time you quite significantly remove the amount of shots what you make on a general shoot. I land around 9 to 10 seconds of exposure, and from there I will make a bigger print. So for this paper and this magnification, I actually will write down the magnification ratio for the 80mm lens and this size of the paper. And I'm actually thinking about the creation of the general lab book for the printing, because it's require a little bit of the noting in the proper order to trying to recreate the work. So I'm just thinking about the journal which you can make each print, and each print have a serial number, and in principle you can trace back all the settings and all magnifications. And nevertheless, I really like the analog stuff, but in the same time I really like the information and storage and all types of things around it. So just imagine how cool it will be if your enlarger can actually make magnification settings stored somewhere in the memory, and at the same time you know the exposure time which is also stored in the memory, and also you can store all the settings on the filters. So this sounds really great, and I think in the darkroom you have a lot of improvements and a lot of good stuff to make a small but golden bridge between the two different types of technology. And go back to results. I really like this print. This is so Copenhagen, and at the same time on the left side you have the girls with a bike and some kind of a chair, and in the middle of the frame you have a couple sitting close to the restaurant. It's actually quite chilly outside at the time, and it's plus 3 degrees of Celsius, so you can imagine it's quite Copenhagen vibe in one picture. And you can easily take these shots with a Hasselblad, because you're actually shooting from the waist level, and this is quite amazing and quite good arrangement, and nobody care if you take a shot, especially if you flip the mirror before. So thank you for watching, and see you in the next videos.